My new friend and student, Paul, had been cycling through every spiritual practice he could find for 50 years before he and I met through this channel. He'd read every book on your shelf, probably twice. He'd subbed to every teacher you've watched here on YouTube. He'd given years of sincere effort to every type of meditation you've heard of, probably a few more. And just like you, he had moments where he wondered if lasting peace, clarity, and happiness were just not possible for him. I felt like that too. And just like you, just like me, each time Paul exhausted his perseverance, he'd move on to a new practice, a new teaching, and hope that would be the one that finally helped him see whatever it was that he wasn't seeing. So why did it take 50 years for Paul to discover the peace he was seeking? Well, he told me, and I'm going to tell you. Both you and Paul have my deepest admiration. To continue on the path, even when it seems so hopeless, is a special kind of self-compassion that you may not be able to appreciate just yet, but you will. Paul was a regular at what I call the spiritual buffet. Actually, Paul had the platinum membership. He knew all the chefs by name. He hung out with the bar staff at lock-ins after hours, but he was sick to death of the menu. It didn't matter how many new dishes came in. Christian fundamentalism, a rare meditation technique, a Rupert Spira video that made the penny drop for thousands of other people, but none of it really worked for Paul. In fact, it ended up working against him. He understood intellectually what the chefs were trying to express with their food, but for some reason he could never get the real nourishment from it. Why? Well, we need to explore the problem first, friend. The spiritual buffet is a new problem. If you were to get in a time machine and go back just 100 years, the spiritual teachings and practices to which you had access would have been vastly fewer, in the hundreds or even thousands fewer. If you were like most people, we're talking 99.99999% here, then if you wanted wisdom, or even if you didn't, you just would have been taken along to whatever brand of spirituality was present in your hometown. And that would have been it. Maybe some different teachers or pastors or vicars or priests or whatever the tradition called them might have come through town from time to time. And if you were really keen, then maybe you would have gone and heard those teachings. But they would have very likely just been different denominations of the same faith system. So, for example, here in England, there were different flavors of Christianity. Of course, Catholicism here in the UK as well. Which is, a larger divide than most, right? If I understand it, Christianity and Catholicism have some substantial differences, but they at least come from the same place, right? We're still talking about God, we're still talking about Jesus. And then within Christianity and Catholicism, of course, you have all kinds of denominations. Forgive me if I'm wrong, any of you with a background in either of these faiths, if my terminology is not quite accurate. The point is, the flavor of spirituality, the flavor of wisdom that was available to you 100 years ago was pretty much one. Unless you were a real weirdo and would read books on different faiths. And unless you were really quite brave and daring enough to have gotten on a boat and gone on a long sea voyage to enter into a different religion, then that was all you had. You had whatever brand of spirituality was around in your hometown, pretty much. Contrast to today, we're stood at the spiritual buffet, holding our empty plate, looking around what may as well be like the size of a convention center, full of different food stalls representing different spiritual teachings and practices. Many of us are paralyzed by choice in the beginning. Many of us struggle to, I would say almost all of us, struggle to pick one. And even when we do pick one, we struggle to commit, because not only do we have so much variety in the rest of our lives that to commit deeply to one spiritual teaching and practice for decades, which is often what's been necessary historically, is kind of out of whack with the rest of our lives. We can hop from one streaming service to another. We can hop from one gaming console to another. We typically hop between one romantic partner and another with much greater frequency than has ever been the case before. So we also do the same, of course, with our spiritual practices. We try a form of Buddhism first, and then we go to a Hindu philosophy, and then maybe we try something else, maybe we try something with a more Western flavor. There's no shortage, of course, of new presentations of spirituality. There are teachers, both worthy and unworthy, out there on social media, leading people to great benefit and leading people into all kinds of harm. Of course, you have to navigate this for yourself. So this is you stood at the spiritual buffet looking at your plate going, where the fuck do I start? What do I even... So maybe you put something on your plate and you kind of work with it for a while, and maybe it brings some results, but maybe it doesn't bring the other results that you're after. You continue on like this, and I suspect this sounds familiar. And if you're Paul, you've been wandering around this spiritual buffet for 50 fucking years, trying everything that's on offer and finding that none of it really works. So why didn't it work for Paul? How is it possible that he spent so long as a sincere practitioner, really giving time and energy to these practices? And I'm sure he hopped around, yes, but he also gave adequate time to many of these teachings and practices. How could he not? Over 50 years. Hey, if you're watching, Paul, love ya. Here's what Paul told me when we got together and had a chat about the spiritual buffet. One way of expressing the problem inherent in the spiritual buffet is what I often say, which is the guy from Japan says you must sit this way if you want to get enlightened, but the guy from Thailand says you must sit that way. Well, they can't both be right if we're talking about genuine awakening as the goal. And Paul said, yes, they can't both be right. And he said, I'll never get either while my head's spinning around. In other words, while Paul is looking around at all of the other teachings and practices, or entering into one and trying to get to grips with it, worst of all for Paul, as he expressed to me, and this was the case for me to a lesser degree, though of course I'd not had as much time as Paul had to sample so many different teachings and practices, the worst thing is when we've sampled so many different teachings and practices that they're all kind of swimming around in the thinking mind. We are a cage of concepts. I think these were Paul's words to me, if I'm not mistaken. And something that I was engaged in deeply was trying to figure out which teaching was the right teaching, and or trying to reconcile all of these teachings with their differences together. Well, what I saw eventually, and what Paul saw when he found this channel, to our great benefit, was that we don't have to reconcile these teachings, nor do we have to figure out which one is right. All we have to do is zoom out and appreciate their common essence. If a teaching is a genuine teaching, if it really leads to what we call awakening, freedom, clarity, then it is pointing to the same place. But here's the problem. The pointing occurs in different ways. The famous saying from Zen that you've probably heard is, Zen is a finger pointing at the moon. Don't mistake the finger for the moon. The spiritual buffet represents endless fingers, endless ways of pointing at truth, capital T truth, and the degree to which we mistake these fingers for the moon is the degree to which we're confused. For me, there was a transition period between my Theravada practice and entering fully into the non-dual view. And there was a conflict here between doing and non-doing. So how did I resolve this tension? Well, I continued studying both teachings. I continued experimenting in my direct experience. And what I discovered was that the non-dual teaching included and contained all other teachings, or more accurate to say, the non-dual view includes and contains all other teachings. How could it be otherwise? For what we're recognizing in the non-dual view is our nature as awareness, which, in a way of speaking, includes and contains all of our experience, including spiritual teachings and practices. So I saw that the non-dual view offered me the opportunity to zoom out to a level that I had never zoomed out before, where I even gained a vantage point then over all spiritual teachings and practices, given they are still stuff. We're wandering around the spiritual buffet looking at, okay, what food am I going to grab? What kind of meditation am I going to do this time? What kind of philosophy am I going to adopt this time? Much of this is in words. Much of this is a kind of doing. If it is a technique that you do, it is stuff. It begins and ends. It is something you experience. The non-dual view is concerned with, what do you mean when you say you? What do you mean when you say I? Who is the practitioner who is practicing all of this? Who is it that sees the practitioner? The practitioner is something you experience. It comes and goes within awareness. We may hold some concept of there being a permanent entity that is a practitioner. That's a concept. You don't feel like or identify as a practitioner 24/7, 365. Sometimes you're just taking a shit. Sometimes you're laughing at a joke. Sometimes you're eating something really tasty. Whatever it is that you're doing, there are times that you are not identified as a practitioner. There are times that you're not even identified as any kind of self, but you're still aware. Seeing this, I realized which direction I wanted to go in. I dedicated myself to the non-dual view, and I said to myself, hey, at least I can check this out and hopefully come to some kind of a conclusion within a reasonable time frame. Whereas if I remain in the spiritual buffet rather than looking out over all of it, well, there are too many different presentations of the teaching and the practice here for me to try within one lifetime, let alone commit myself fully to. So this is what I've been able to help Paul see, is that the best course of action is precisely to zoom out from all of what is presented at the spiritual buffet, to see in its greater context, in its ultimate context, all of the efforts you've ever made to practice, to learn, to change or fix or improve or purify yourself. To see in their ultimate context all of the thoughts and feelings associated with all of your practice, all of your study. Whether in spirituality or any other walk of life, it's all the same. Like I say, it's all stuff. We can point to relative differences, but as you've seen, as I saw, as Paul saw, remaining immersed in those relative differences, in other words, staying at the spiritual buffet, leads nowhere. We are more ready collectively now than ever to enter what we could call a post-spirituality era. We no longer need the trappings of spirituality. We no longer need the cultural baggage. We no longer need spiritual aesthetics. You can enjoy those if you like. I'm wearing this mala here. My parents-in-law are from India, and it fits, but I don't practice with it. I don't need it. You don't need it either, friend. What you need is to recognize your nature as awareness, in which, as which, by which, and through which you know everything you've ever known, including every spiritual practice you've ever tried, including every spiritual book you've ever read, including every spiritual teaching you've ever heard. I hope you were able to get a glimpse of what I was talking about there in your direct experience as I spoke. We kind of transitioned into a bit of a pointing there. If you came to this video ready for a shift in perspective, then you very likely had one, though it may have been subtle. How do you make this perspective your new baseline, as opposed to just another fleeting glimpse? Well, that's where we need to have a conversation about you. That's where we need to identify what is your primary spiritual blockage at this moment. In other words, what is it that's obscuring for you this view that I've presented today? And for figuring that out, I've developed a 1-minute quiz for you. There's a link in the description. You'll answer just 3 questions. And with those questions, I'll learn about you and send you some personalized guidance, which, if appropriate, may lead to one or more opportunities for us to get together and have a deeper conversation about where you're at. This is how to deepen and stabilize this view that I'm presenting here. So please do click that link if you felt even the tiniest shift as you listened to this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, Subscribe if you want to see more of them. And I'll see you back here very soon.